You know what's funny about all of this? Captain Maya Rodriguez lazily spun her coffee mug on the conference table, watching the dark liquid create a perfect whirlpool. They actually thought we were being nice this whole time. The assembled human delegates, representing what remained of Earth's unified government, exchanged knowing glances. Some smirked, others shook their heads in disbelief, and a few even chuckled darkly at the absurdity of it all. Admiral James O'Connor, his weathered face bearing the scars of countless battles, leaned forward. "Enlighten me, Captain. What exactly did our gracious galactic neighbors think we were doing?" Maya's lips curled into a predatory smile. "According to the latest intelligence reports from the Galactic Council, they believed our restrained responses to their provocations were signs of weakness, that we were desperately trying to prove ourselves civilized." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. "They thought we were scared of them." "Well," drawled Dr. Raj Patel, Earth's leading xenobiologist, "that's got to be the biggest miscalculation since the Hindenburg safety inspector said, 'Yeah, this'll work fine.'" The room erupted in bitter laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter you'd hear at a comedy club. It was the kind that emerged from the depths of collective trauma. The kind that said, "We tried to play nice, and look where it got us." For the past 15 years, humanity had played by the Galactic Council's rules. When they classified Earth as a Class 13 Deathworld and restricted human expansion to a mere dozen systems, we complied. When they demanded we modify our genetic structure to be more peaceful, we politely declined but offered countless diplomatic alternatives. When they imposed trade sanctions that nearly crippled our economy, we gritted our teeth and found creative solutions. But then they crossed the line. They crossed it so far that the line wasn't even visible in their rearview mirrors. "Play the recording again," Admiral O'Connor commanded, his voice barely containing his rage. "I want everyone to remember exactly why we're here." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the recent broadcast from High Counselor Zixtal of the Galactic Council. The tall, willowy alien's iridescent scales gleamed under the council chamber's lights as they announced their latest protective measure against the Deathworld menace. In light of the continuing threat posed by the human species, the Galactic Council has unanimously voted to implement the planetary quarantine protocol. All human colonies will be immediately evacuated, and the species will be confined to their homeworld for the next 1,000 cycles, or until such time as they evolve beyond their primitive violent tendencies. Maya set her mug down with deliberate care. "They're already moving their fleets into position. The evacuation orders have been sent to New Mars, Europa Prime, and all our other colonies. They expect us to just roll over and accept this." Dr. Patel snorted. "Did none of them bother to study Earth's history? Like, at all? Because I'm pretty sure there are some rather pointed lessons about trying to forcibly relocate humans against their will." "Oh, they studied our history," Lieutenant Kira Yamamoto chimed in, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly as she accessed classified files. "They just came to all the wrong conclusions. According to their analysis, humans are, and I quote, fundamentally cowardly creatures who resort to violence only when they lack the intellectual capacity to find peaceful solutions." Another round of that dark, knowing laughter filled the room. Admiral O'Connor stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the table. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time we showed our galactic neighbors just how wrong they are. Dr. Patel, how's Project Prometheus coming along?" Raj's usually jovial expression turned serious. "The biomechanical augmentations are ready for mass deployment. And before you ask, yes, they're completely undetectable by current Galactic Council scanning technology. They still think we're barely able to splice genes, let alone create quantum-integrated neural enhancements." "Lieutenant Yamamoto, the fleet?" Kira's cybernetic eye pulsed with data. "The stealth systems are operating at 147% of expected efficiency. They're so focused on looking for our registered ships that they haven't noticed we've quintupled our military capacity in the past 3 years. The new Titan-class dreadnoughts are ready to launch on your command." "And the best part?" Maya added, her grin now reaching predatory proportions. "They still think our fastest ships can only manage fold factor 7. They have no idea we cracked fold factor 15 2 years ago." The Admiral nodded, satisfaction evident in his stance. "And the colonists? Already implementing Protocol Omega," Lieutenant Yamamoto reported. "Every man, woman, and child above the age of 16 has been preparing for this possibility since we established the colonies. The Galactic Council's evacuation forces are in for one hell of a surprise." Dr. Patel raised his hand like an eager schoolboy. Oh, can I be the one to tell them about the honey badgers?" Maya nearly choked on her coffee. We are not deploying the enhanced honey badgers. The Geneva Convention still applies, Raj. Fine, fine. But you have to admit, it would have been hilarious. Admiral O'Connor cleared his throat, bringing the room back to attention. The Galactic Council believes they're dealing with a primitive species that can be cowed into submission. They think we've been showing restraint out of fear or weakness. He paused, looking each person in the eye. It's time they learned what human restraint really means, and what happens when we stop showing it. Maya stood, stretching like a cat waking from a nap. You know what the really hilarious part is? We actually were trying to be nice. All those diplomatic missions, cultural exchange programs, scientific collaborations, we genuinely wanted to be part of their galactic community. Their loss, Kira shrugged. Should we send them a message before we begin? The Admiral considered this for a moment. Actually, yes. Captain Rodriguez, since you have such a way with words, would you do the honors? Maya cracked her knuckles and approached the communication terminal. The others watched as she composed a brief message to be broadcast on all Galactic Council frequencies. Dear Galactic Council, for 15 years, you mistook our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for fear, and our restraint for limitation. You believed you were being generous by allowing us to exist within your carefully controlled boundaries. You thought you were being wise by treating us like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. We tried to show you that humanity could be more than what you feared. We extended hands in friendship only to be met with restrictions. We offered cooperation and received sanctions. We demonstrated patience while you plotted our confinement. You should have paid more attention to our history. Specifically, the parts about what happens when you back humans into a corner. Consider this message your first and final warning. Release all sanctions, withdraw your forces, and acknowledge humanity's right to self-determination within the next 24 Earth hours, or discover exactly why Earth isn't classified as a death world because of its wildlife, but because of us. Yours sincerely, Humanity, P.S. Those trade sanctions you imposed, we'd like to thank you for forcing us to become entirely self-sufficient. It's going to make what comes next so much more interesting. The room was silent for a moment after Maya finished composing the message. Then Dr. Patel slow-clapped. Beautiful, though you forgot to mention the honey badgers. Raj, I swear to God. Admiral O'Connor raised his hand for silence. Send it, and begin broadcasting the Ride of the Valkyries on all frequencies. If we're going to do this, we might as well do it with style. As Maya pressed the transmit button, she couldn't help but add, You know they're going to call this an act of war. The Admiral's response was immediate. No, Captain, this isn't war. This is a physics lesson about actions and reactions. They're about to learn that for every action they've taken against humanity, there's an equal and opposite reaction. He paused, then smiled grimly. Except in this case, the reaction is going to be significantly less equal and a whole lot less opposite. The next 24 hours would go down in galactic history as the beginning of what the Council species would come to call the Human Awakening. Humanity, however, had a different name for it, the fuck around and find out protocol. And as the first notes of Wagner's masterpiece echoed through space, humanity prepared to show the galaxy exactly why you don't corner a species that turned one of the most hostile planets in the known universe into a garden world through sheer stubbornness and spite. The Council had thought they were being prudent by containing humanity. They were about to learn that some forces of nature can't be contained. They can only be unleashed. And humanity? Humanity was done playing nice. As Maya watched the message being transmitted, she remembered something her grandmother used to say. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everything you meet. Humanity had been polite. They had been professional. Now it was time for Plan 3. The response from the Galactic Council came 19 hours later. It was short, dismissive, and exactly what everyone had expected. Your threats are noted, but will not deter us from our duty to protect the galaxy from Deathworld species. The quarantine will proceed as planned. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. Maya read the message aloud to the war room, then looked up with an expression that could only be described as delighted disappointment. Well, they made their choice. Admiral O'Connor nodded solemnly. Indeed they did, Captain. Indeed they did. He turned to Lieutenant Yamamoto. Begin Operation Prometheus, and someone please tell Dr. Patel that no, we still cannot deploy the honey badgers. A distant, "Aw, come on," could be heard from somewhere in the facility. The next few hours would teach the Galactic Council several important lessons about humanity. The first lesson began when their evacuation fleet arrived at New Mars, expecting to find a compliant colony ready for relocation. Instead, they found empty cities. When they landed to investigate, they discovered that the colony's entire population had seemingly vanished. As their search parties spread out, they failed to notice that the colony's architecture, which they had always dismissed as primitive and inefficient, was specifically designed for urban warfare. The second lesson came when they realized that humans had not, in fact, been showing their full technological capabilities in their previous encounters. The third lesson arrived shortly after, when they learned that a human's definition of appropriate force was vastly different from their own. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: never ever mistake kindness for weakness, especially when that kindness comes from a species that calls their homeworld a Deathworld with pride. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity? Humanity was just getting started. After all, they had 15 years of restraint to make up for. The first shots of humanity's retaliation weren't fired from guns. They came from servers. "Initiating Operation Blackout," Lieutenant Yamamoto announced, her cybernetic eye cycling through spectrums of light as she interfaced directly with Earth's quantum mainframe. 3, 2, 1. Across Galactic Council space, something remarkable happened. Nothing. More specifically, nothing continued to work. See, while the Council had been busy imposing trade sanctions and patting themselves on the back for containing the primitive Deathworlders, humanity had been quietly mapping every single network vulnerability in their supposedly superior systems. Turned out that when you believe yourself to be technologically supreme, you tend to get a bit sloppy with security. "Status report," Admiral O'Connor demanded, watching the massive holographic display as system after system went dark. Maya leaned back in her chair, boots propped up on the conference table. Their entire FTL communication network just went offline. Emergency systems are trying to compensate, but... She paused to take a sip of her ever-present coffee. "Well, let's just say Dr. Patel's virus is having a wonderful time." "It's not just a virus," Raj protested from his workstation, where he was watching streams of data with childlike glee. "I prefer to call it an automated entropy enhancement protocol. Also, I may have programmed it to rickroll their emergency broadcasts." "You did not." "Oh, but I did. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down." Admiral O'Connor cleared his throat loudly. "Doctor, while I appreciate your creative additions, perhaps we could focus on the tactical situation." "Right, sorry." Raj spun in his chair to face the room. "Phase 1 is complete. Their entire command and control infrastructure is compromised. They can't coordinate their fleets. Their automated defense systems are about as useful as a chocolate teapot, and, my personal favorite, their artificial gravity generators are now programmed to play the Mexican hat dance at random intervals." Maya snorted coffee through her nose. "You didn't?" "Oh, but I did. Just wait until they try to hold their emergency council session. Nothing says we're in trouble quite like having to dance every 15 minutes. Lieutenant Yamamoto's cybernetic eye flashed. "Incoming transmission from New Mars. Operation Trojan Horse is a go." The holographic display shifted to show the New Mars colony, where the Council's evacuation fleet had walked right into humanity's trap. The empty cities had been more than just abandoned structures. They were elaborate mousetraps, and the Council forces were the mice. "Playing tactical feed," Kira announced. The room watched as the Council's forces, convinced they were dealing with primitive architecture, began their systematic search of the colony. None of them noticed that the building's seemingly crude design was actually an intricate network of defensive positions, or that the primitive metal alloys used in construction were specifically engineered to be invisible to their scanners, while housing some of humanity's most advanced weapon systems. They definitely noticed when the walls started shooting back. "Look at them scrambling," Maya commented, watching as the Council forces discovered that their energy shields, designed to stop plasma weapons and kinetic rounds, did absolutely nothing against the phase-shifted ammunition humanity had developed. "They still think we're using regular bullets." "Should we tell them those aren't actually bullets?" Raj asked innocently. "And ruin the surprise when they start phase-shifting through their ship's hulls? Where's the fun in that?" Admiral O'Connor allowed himself a small smile. "Lieutenant, status of the Titan-class deployments." Kira's eye pulsed as she accessed the tactical network. "All ships in position, sir. They're still completely undetected thanks to the quantum camouflage. The Council fleet has no idea they're surrounded." "Excellent. Captain Rodriguez, would you like to do the honors?" Maya stood, cracking her knuckles as she approached the command console. "With pleasure, sir." She keyed the comm system. "Attention all Titan-class vessels. Execute Operation Checkmate. Authorization code. Humanity says hello." Across the galaxy, humanity's real fleet dropped their camouflage. The Council's evacuation forces suddenly found themselves facing ships that, by their understanding of human technology, shouldn't exist for another century at least. "Oh, look," Raj commented cheerfully. "They're trying to send out a distress signal. Should we let this one through?" Maya pretended to consider it. "Yeah, why not? Let them call for help. It'll save us the trouble of hunting down their reinforcements." As the Council forces began to realize just how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered, Admiral O'Connor turned to his staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's time for Phase 3. Dr. Patel, if you would." Raj's grin turned positively manic. "Finally." He pressed a series of commands on his console, initiating Protocol Lazarus. Across every human colony, hidden bunkers began to open, but they weren't releasing weapons or soldiers. Instead, they revealed vast industrial complexes, fully automated factories and shipyards that had been operating in secret for years, protected by quantum fields that made them invisible to Council scans. "You know what the really funny part is?" Maya mused as they watched the facilities power up. "We actually weren't lying about those trade sanctions forcing us to become self-sufficient. We just didn't mention that self-sufficient meant able to build a fleet that makes their entire armada look like a collection of rowboats." Kira's eyes suddenly flashed red. "Sir, we're detecting multiple fold space ruptures. The Council is deploying their reserve fleets." "Right on schedule," Admiral O'Connor nodded. "Dr. Patel, are our guests ready?" "Oh, they've been ready for hours, just waiting for the perfect moment to make their entrance." As if on cue, new signals appeared on the tactical display. But these weren't human ships. These were vessels belonging to other species. Dozens of races that the Council had similarly oppressed, restricted, or contained for the greater good. Turned out humans weren't the only ones who'd been playing nice while secretly preparing for payback. "Message from the Arxid Collective," Kira announced. "They say, and I quote, 'We brought popcorn. Please tell us you recorded the Council's faces when you revealed the Titan fleet.'" Maya laughed. "Send them my personal recording, and tell them they're just in time for the best part." Because now, as the Council's reinforcements arrived expecting to find a primitive species in need of containment, they instead found themselves facing not just humanity's full technological might, but a coalition of every lesser species they'd ever underestimated. Dr. Patel raised his hand again. "Now can I deploy the honey badgers?" "No!" The Galactic Council's emergency session was everything humanity could have hoped for and more. "I'm watching the feed right now," Maya announced, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. They just hit the 15-minute mark and, yep, there it is. The entire Council chamber is doing the Mexican hat dance. Dr. Patel took an elaborate bow. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Academy, and also whoever designed their artificial gravity systems with such exploitable firmware." On the main display, the Council members struggled to maintain their dignity while their own floor forced them to dance. High Counselor Zixtal's attempts to deliver a stern speech about human aggression lost something in the translation when they had to hop in circles every few words. "Incoming transmission from the Arxid Collective," Lieutenant Yamamoto reported, her cybernetic eye twinkling with what might have been amusement. "They're requesting permission to broadcast this live across all their networks. Apparently they're running a betting pool on which counselor will break first." Admiral O'Connor pinched the bridge of his nose. "Remind me again why we let Dr. Patel handle the cyber warfare package?" "Because," Maya replied, "he's the only one who could code a virus sophisticated enough to penetrate their quantum-encrypted networks while simultaneously programming it to rickroll their emergency broadcasts and make their gravity plates dance." "Fair point. Lieutenant, tactical update?" Kira's eye pulsed as she accessed the battle networks. "Council forces are in complete disarray. Their attempts to coordinate a response are, well, see for yourself. The holographic display split to show multiple theaters of operation." In the new Mars system, Council ships were discovering that their much-vaunted energy shields were worse than useless against humanity's phase-shifted weapons. The protective fields actually helped guide the rounds directly to their targets. Around Europa Prime, the Council's attempt to establish a blockade had turned into a game of cat and mouse. Except the mice had invisibility cloaks, and the cats were blindfolded. But the real show was happening in the Proxima Centauri colony. Are they seriously trying to engage the Titan-class ships in close combat?" Maya asked incredulously. Dr. Patel leaned forward, squinting at the display. "Oh, bless their hearts. They still think our ships use conventional engines. Nobody told them about the quantum displacement drives." "Nope," Kira replied, popping the P. "They're about to find out, though." They watched as a Council dreadnought, easily 10 times the size of the human vessel it was pursuing, closed in for what it thought would be an easy kill. The Titan-class ship, the HSS Thermopylae, appeared to be fleeing at its expected maximum speed. Then it wasn't there anymore. What just? One of the junior officers started to ask. The Thermopylae reappeared directly behind the Council dreadnought, having quantum shifted through space itself rather than actually traveling through it. Before the Council ship could react, the human vessel launched what appeared to be a single small projectile. "Oh, they're using the new RKVs," Dr. Patel noted with professional interest. "This should be good." These small projectiles split into thousands of submunitions, each one phase-shifted to a different quantum frequency. The Council ship's shields, designed to stop conventional weapons, might as well have been tissue paper. Maya whistled low. "How many penetrations?" "All of them," Kira reported. The RKV submunitions hit every critical system simultaneously. Their power core is contained, but they've lost all weapons, shields, and propulsion. The Arxid ships are moving in to accept their surrender. Admiral O'Connor nodded in satisfaction. "And the other fronts?" "The Nixar Confederation has successfully liberated their homeworld. Turns out the Council's orbital defense platforms aren't very effective when their targeting systems are too busy playing never gonna give you up to actually target anything. The Cathari remnant has reclaimed their colony worlds, and the Zinza Federation..." She paused, double-checking her data. "The Zinza Federation is requesting that we send them copies of our combat footage because, quote, this is better than any entertainment stream we've ever produced." "Sir," one of the communication officers called out, "High Counselor Zixtal is requesting an immediate ceasefire and negotiations." Maya raised an eyebrow. "In the middle of their mandatory dance session?" "Actually, they're trying to conduct the negotiations while dancing. It's quite a sight." Dr. Patel raised his hand again. "I vote we make them do the Macarena for the peace talks." Raj, "What? It's a classic. Plus, I already wrote the code." Admiral O'Connor held up a hand for silence. "While I appreciate the creative psychological warfare, perhaps we should focus on their actual response. Lieutenant, what are the Council's terms?" Kira's eye flickered as she processed the incoming transmission. "They're offering to rescind the quarantine order, acknowledge humanity's right to self-determination, and establish new diplomatic protocols that..." She paused, her organic eye widening. "That recognize Earth as a Class 15 civilization, rather than a Class 13 Deathworld species." The room fell silent. "Well," Maya finally said, "that's interesting. They're not just backing down. They're acknowledging us as their technological equals, maybe even superiors." "Should we accept?" someone asked. Admiral O'Connor looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. "What do you think? We've demonstrated our capabilities, shown them the folly of underestimating humanity, and achieved our primary objectives. The question is, do we trust them to keep their word this time?" Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "If I may, I suggest we accept their terms, conditionally." "Go on." "Well, we've already proven we can shut down their entire civilization with a few lines of code. Why not leave a few insurance policies in place? Nothing harmful, just some dormant programs that might, say, make their gravity plates do the YMCA if they ever try to pull something like this again." Maya grinned. "I like it. The threat of involuntary dance parties as a peacekeeping measure, very human." Maya pulled up the latest data on her neural interface. Another gift of human innovation that had the Council species absolutely baffled. How did one properly classify a civilization that could plug their brains directly into computers, but still insisted on having Taco Tuesday in all diplomatic functions? "The joint development programs are exceeding expectations," she reported. "The Arxid's biotech expertise combined with our quantum mechanics has already revolutionized medical science across known space. The Nixar's understanding of psychic phenomena, merged with our computational models, has opened up entirely new fields of physics. And the Cathari..." She paused, grinning. "The Cathari have formally requested that Earth export something called pizza to all their worlds, declaring it a crucial technological advancement." "And the former Council species?" "Still adjusting," Kira replied. "Though I have to say, watching the Zixtal attempting to participate in human sports has been entertaining." On cue, the holographic display showed footage from the first Interstellar Olympics, where a very determined Zixtal athlete was attempting to understand the concept of basketball. The fact that they had evolved from something akin to spacefaring octopi made dribbling particularly interesting. Dr. Patel's latest project? Admiral O'Connor asked, noting the barely suppressed grins on his officers' faces. He's teaching them Earth dances, voluntarily this time. Maya shook her head in wonder. Apparently, after a year of mandatory dance protocols, several species actually developed a genuine interest in human movement arts. The Galactic Cultural Exchange now has a waiting list for dance instructors. Speaking of cultural exchange, Kira interjected, the first human-designed FTL drives are being distributed to our ally species next week. The Council's former monopoly on fold space technology is officially over. Admiral O'Connor nodded in satisfaction. And the defense arrangements? The Joint Species Defense Force is fully operational. Turns out when you combine human tactical innovation, Arxid biotechnology, Nixar psychic abilities, and Cathari energy manipulation, Maya's grin turned predatory. Well, let's just say nobody's talking about containing dangerous species anymore. And the honey badgers? Still classified, sir, though Dr. Patel keeps submitting requests to at least show them to the Arxid bioengineers. Something about sharing humanity's greatest achievement. The Admiral sighed. Deny those requests. The galaxy's not ready for that level of chaos. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert. A new signal had been detected at the edge of known space. First contact with a previously unknown civilization. Well, Maya said, reviewing the preliminary data. This should be interesting. Their first impression of galactic civilization will be quite different from what it would have been a year ago. How so? Instead of meeting the Council's perfect, ordered, hierarchical society, she gestured at the scene below, where representatives from dozens of species were gathering for the inaugural session of the new Galactic Assembly. A Zixtal diplomat was enthusiastically teaching a group of Nixar representatives how to do the electric slide. Nearby, a Cathari cultural attaché was passionately arguing with an Arxid scientist about the proper way to eat a pizza. They're going to meet us at our most human, Kira finished. Chaotic, innovative, and absolutely refusing to take ourselves too seriously. Admiral O'Connor allowed himself a small smile. Send out the first contact team, and make sure Dr. Patel hasn't added any dance protocols to the universal translators this time. About that, sir. Maya started. What did he do? Nothing mandatory. He just might have included what he calls a diplomatic icebreaker protocol. If there's an awkward silence in the negotiations that lasts more than 30 seconds, the translator starts playing Ice Ice Baby. The Admiral closed his eyes and counted to 10. You know what? Leave it in. If they're going to join Galactic Society, they might as well know what they're getting into from the start. Because that was perhaps the greatest victory of all. Humanity hadn't just proved their worth to the galaxy. They'd transformed it into something new. Something that embraced both the serious and the absurd, the technological and the traditional, the diplomatic and the delightfully chaotic. They'd made the galaxy more human. And somehow, improbably, that had made it better. Even if it did mean that every major diplomatic function now had to include both a formal dinner and a dance floor. In a secure facility on Earth, a scientist reviewed the latest test results from the enhanced honey badger program. The creatures looked up at her with an intelligence that definitely hadn't been there before the modifications. One of them had learned to play chess. Another had developed a taste for classical music. And all of them, without exception, could dance better than most Council species. Dr. Patel was never going to let them live this down. The real end, unless the honey badgers have something to say about it.